Welcome to the SBI Podcast, offering CEOs, sales and marketing leaders ideas to make the number.
Welcome, SBI Podcast listeners and video podcast viewers. My name is Greg Alexander, and I am the CEO of SBI, a sales and marketing firm dedicated to helping you make your number. This is the weekly SBI podcast, and its purpose is to help you make your number by getting your peers to share with you how they make theirs. Today's guest is Charles Race, and he is the Executive Vice President of Field Operations at Informatica, an enterprise software company who is the leader in the data integration sector with approximately $1.1 billion in sales and about 3,500 employees. Charles has been with the company for 10 years and heads sales, field marketing, and professional services globally. Charles, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Greg. Good to be here.
All right. So, Charles, my team that works with you and your team tells me you have an excellent process regarding territory planning and specifically headcount relative to quota capacity. And some of our listeners struggle with this and could benefit from your wisdom. So I thought this could be our topic today. How does that sound to you?
Sounds good.
All right. So this is a big subject. So we're going to need some structure to our conversation. So I'm going to use our playbook titled How to Make Your Number in 2016, specifically Phase 8, which can be found on pages 174 and 175. If you want to follow along at home, head over to salesbenchmarkindex.com/2016 report and get a copy. All right, the objective of this work is to balance territories by putting the best reps in the territories with the most potential so as to maximize revenue generation. So let's start with some questions here. So Charles, how do you determine the potential of each account?
Okay, so as a quick step back so that I can explain how we got to where we did. We used to run tops-down planning. And tops-down means you get a number, you expect to grow by 20%, and you add that number and send it out. And that number then results in quotas going up by that amount, or you add in additional territories to that percentage to get to your number. Right. And this isn't, it certainly isn't very scientific. It's fine when you're small and where reps are running territories based on, I guess, a region or a zip code, set of zip codes. But if you want to look at the potential of an account, as you become more mature in those accounts, you really have to supplement that with a bottoms-up approach. You're never going to get away from tops-down, I understand. And in the bottoms-up approach, the aim is to set quota based on opportunity. So if you take that step back and to look at your question, in order to understand the opportunity, you need to know what the potential of every account is. Mm-hmm. And we started implementing opportunity-based quotas about 3 years ago. And the premise is you look at the accounts first, long before you then try and create territories. And for each account, you'll be looking at a number of factors. Some people rely purely on propensity to spend data that you can get from the likes of Gartner. We also look at the number of products or solution areas that a company has already purchased from us, the known competitive landscape in those accounts. We look at the market availability based on other external data. We also look at the opportunity that's in pipe over the next 18 months. And of course, for listeners who have different sales cycles, our sales cycle is approximately 18 months long. So it can, obviously, that's going to depend. You won't get so much visibility a long way out if you only have a short sales cycle. We collect all of that information and come up with a pretty much by product line, and it's not really product selling, but we have product groupings which pretty much indicate the type of solution. So whether it's, for us, somebody going into analytics or data governance or looking at IT optimization as a category of IT spend. So based on that rather huge matrix, as you can imagine, of information, I then implemented a basic calculation which gives an indication of a range of quotas that would be appropriate, because we also have to include the close rates. So in a very large customer, the odds are you'll close at a much higher rate, maybe 1.5x, than you would going into a new logo, for example, where you may need coverage up to 5x. So we use that information as well. And this gives us then a feel for the amount of opportunity in the next 2 years that we're going to be able to plan for. And the reason you do 2 years, and I guess my first bit of advice to anybody is, you need to start this process at least 6 months before you enter the next year, which is a real pain. It's a pain because you don't actually know how the year's going to end before you're planning the next one. So it becomes a constantly changing work in progress.
Yeah.
So the idea then is, the first step is understand what the potential that you could sell into each account is. And that will give you effectively a number that you can then start doing some things with. And I guess that's the first stage in the account potential.
Okay, so let me ask you a few things about this. So you said you want to start this about 6 months in advance, and I understand the downsides of that because things are going to happen that will change the underlying data set. Why the need to start for 6 months in advance? Is just because the matrix is so complicated that you just need time to do the work?
Part of it is that, absolutely. The other is you need to then look at all of the other functions which are going to make a sales rep successful. Again, if your business is reliant on a sales rep knocking on doors and being able to sell on their own, that doesn't take quite so much time. If you've got complex enterprise sales where it's an entire account team which requires specialism by products or specialism by business solution area, whether you need industry consulting, the number of pre-sales that you would need, and if as we move more into a subscription mode where services become more of an upfront part of the process, it's not just the sales reps that you're actually planning for here. It's a whole internal ecosystem that has to be planned as well, right down to including where field marketing money is going to be spent in order to ensure you've got the pipeline to get at that opportunity that you did in step one. Right. So step one will give you that by account and probably by product line or solution area. The next level then is to start looking at, well, okay, how am I going to support getting at that opportunity? And this takes a long time. And starting that, we typically start in May, we're a calendar year, so we typically start in May to roll out in January. The knock-on effect of doing this late is that compensation plans will come out well into the fiscal year. And that is something that's just going to cause really high attrition. So it can be done in a short period of time, but it won't be done very well. Yeah,
I mean, I agree with you. I think the more time, the better, and you certainly want everybody to leave sales kickoff with their quota and their comp plan. So I can see why you're starting so early. And I love the fact that you're 3 years into opportunity-based quota setting. Let me ask you a question as it relates to new product launch. So you do it by product line. Existing products are probably pretty easy. You're looking at the product roadmap, which is a release date into the future. Does the whole thing get thrown into chaos when the product team is 60 days late?
So we're very careful with new product launches, and there's two types of product launch. There's new versions and new functionality of existing product lines, and they just really for me, they're value add to differentiate us on the potential that we've already known. So we should be able to continue planning against those and hopefully get higher close rates and hopefully higher ASP on those accounts. Where the complexity comes in is where there's an expectation on a brand new product line. That could be through acquisition, or it could be through internal innovation that we've built out a new product line. And for those, I look at a sales specialist model, or incubation sales, depending on how you want to look at it. And typically, so this is a double comped overlaid model, that a separate sales team is responsible for ensuring that we get the traction, the enablement, and the scale of that product long before I base my compensation, my quota planning and capacity model purely on the success of the unknown. Now, it's a little expensive, so you then have to look at uplifts in quotas, and we can talk about quotas in a moment.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
But there's a number of knock-on effects of doing that. But we've tried a number of different models, and running sales specialism for new products gives them the best chance of success.
Yep. Okay, very good. So I got a feel for how you look at opportunity at the account level, which obviously would prioritize which accounts to focus on based on the opportunity size. When you think about the optimal size of each territory, what's the unit of measure there?
Okay, so there isn't a single unit of measure for territory sizing. But let me first of all describe the role types that we have. So back in the day where I was talking about at the beginning, we just had sales reps, and a sales rep had a number of accounts based on their zip codes or region. Now we have segmented both roles and accounts. And they're based on primarily revenue of those organizations, and within that, then how much they spend with us. The reason for this is twofold. One is it helps us focus the highest potential accounts with dedicated resources, because obviously if you've got 100 accounts, 2 of them can do 50% of your quota. Right. The other 98 accounts aren't going to get much of a look in. So we'd be doing ourselves a disservice. Equally, if you've got an awful lot of new logos in your patch, you probably need more coverage. You'll have more time because not everyone's going to have live opportunity. So those accounts which are the largest organizations in the world, which have the highest propensity to spend with us and which are existing customers, would more likely fall into a strategic segment. And then we have a major account segment and a territory segment below that. And you could roughly say that the number of accounts that fall into each one of those, a sales rep accounts could probably handle between 1 and 3, maybe maximum 3, depends on really the size of it. So take something like GE. Mm-hmm. That would be a full-time role for an account, for a rep. You might have several reps purely running that, depending on your business. Second, then, major accounts, you might have between 3 and 20, maybe, depending. Again, we probably settle around 10. And then territory, you would have a larger number, which would be supported by a different route to market. Yeah. But the reason that we do that is then it's also a very different makeup of sales rep. Somebody who's a great strategic account manager into existing accounts who can almost coordinate all of the resources internally and externally needed to make that account successful is different to a sales rep that's knocking down doors and trying to get his footprint into new accounts. And you can look at these sales types. I don't know if your readers have read the Challenger Sales book, the Challenger Sales model. You know, the segmentation of these types of roles is pretty clear as to the sort of person you're then going to need to manage your strategic accounts versus your major versus your territory. So, not entirely sure if that answers your question, but that's the next level of measurement we would then look at. But it does bring with it the next problem, which is if you are then going to do that en masse and reduce the size of people's territories so that they can maximize value, the odds are that you're going to start having account movement, and that is another variable that comes into play. Yeah,
we're going to get to that later on, so let's hold the thought on that. This is fascinating stuff. So let's take a quick break here, but don't go away, because when we come back, I'm going to ask Charles to discuss his approach for balancing territories, his method for assessing the potential of each territory, which we got into a little bit, but I want to look at it at the territory level, and how he sets quota for each territory. So don't go anywhere.
Each day, you receive hundreds of emails, tons of text messages, countless telephone calls, and sit in too many meetings. How do you find ideas to make the number with all this noise? The SBI blog filters all this nonsense for you and presents only first-rate ideas to make the number. Simplify your life. Subscribe to one blog and read the best content. Go to salesbenchmarkindex.com and subscribe today.
Okay, welcome back. My name is Greg Alexander, and I'm the CEO of SBI. My guest today is Charles Race, the EVP of Sales, Field Marketing, and Professional Services for $1.1 billion enterprise software leader Informatica. Today we are discussing how to determine headcount and quota capacity, and we're using SBI's methodology to provide structure to our dialogue, specifically pages 174 and 175 in our workbook titled How to Make Your Number in 2016, which you can get a copy of at salesbenchmarkindex.com/2016 report. Before the break, Charles shared with us how he determines the potential of each account, which accounts should be prioritized based on that potential, and how he determines the optimal size of each territory. During this segment, we're going to hear from Charles how he balances territories, how he assesses the potential of each territory, and how he assigns a quota to each territory. So let's talk about balancing territories. So as I understand it, you've got your strategic account groups, which is say 1 to 3. You've got your major account group, which is to say 3 to 20, and then you've got your kind of your territory sales rep, for lack of a better term there, which would have, lots of new accounts and probably more focused on new logos. So as it relates to balancing territories, when I hear something 1 to 3 or 3 to 20, that's a big range, right? So you mentioned bottoms up. Are you looking at things like workload capacity? Like what would it take for a salesperson to serve this territory? How do you balance the patches?
That's again, it's a combination of science and art. At the beginning I talked about how we would look at the opportunity or the potential of an account, and that it may well be that the potential of that account falls into some of our product lines which have lower cost of sale or lower time of sale and require fewer resources. It may be that some accounts have particularly long sales cycles. For instance, they could be public sector, or they have the opportunity is in product areas which themselves, like our master data management product line, which is very much around business transformation projects. They again would require more resources and take longer. So you have to look at what it is you're trying to do in each account, and we use a sort of variant of the RAD framework where you look at within an account, those that you want to retain, those to acquire, and those that you wish to develop. And then as you break that down, you look at within the opportunity as you see it, are there incumbent partners, for instance, some of the global systems integrators, or is this going to be a team sell that we perform on our own? And this is probably the hardest piece of all of the work that needs to be done, because it's the bit which is a little bit more subjective. Yeah. Now, when we then look at that, I don't focus at all, and a big mistake that I've made in the past was trying to balance quotas. What we need to do is balance the territory so that a sales rep's time, the amount of time that they have in a week, let's hope it's nearer 50 or 60 hours rather than 20 or 30. But the amount of time they have in a week, they've got the maximum opportunity to go and take advantage of the potential that we've already discovered. And based on that, we will then look at the amount of quota that they would then have to carry. But to get the balance, we're looking really for the amount of effort required to go after that opportunity in the amount of time it's going to take to get the opportunity. So again, I may well have a rep who's got huge opportunity, but it's really the beginning of some long sales cycles. And you've got two options there. You could look at doing 2-year comp plans. That's one option. Or you could say, I want to augment some of this space with some transactional business that'll both keep the rep busy in the lulls of activity and enable them to get some incremental revenue into the company. So you really have to go through, at that point in time, every sales rep's territory as you've originally defined it. Now, herein then lies the part of the tops-down component. We have to grow our business, and we do intend to grow it faster than the market so that we can gain market share. That's what I hope everybody would be trying to do. So consequently, we are going to have to look at opportunities to create new territories so that we can hire additional sales reps in to create more capacity and go after the bigger opportunity. So as you're going through this process, it's not a case of that account now has to sort of go into the territory. if an account should be a strategic account, as an example, but there are too many, there's just too much opportunity for a single rep to handle it, that's when then you would start looking at creating some of these ghost territories. Yeah. And we create quite a lot of ghost territories because it enables us to then scale capacity based on success through a year. Part of this comes, I guess, taking it probably to the nth degree of the planning cycle is when you then start costing up your entire organization, you're going to have to make some trade-offs. And you can't always get all of the new heads that you would like, and you can't always get all of the supporting cast that you would like. Mm-hmm. So in the cases where we believe there's an additional territory, but we can't afford it right now, we will create a ghost territory. So a sales rep will own it, knowing that at some point in time, that will become part of a new territory that we'll bring in. And this is an important piece because if you want to scale up mid-year, but you've already assigned all of the accounts, you've got a real pain mantling quotas and territories mid-year. Mm-hmm. So it's something for people to look at, which means, to your question, it could be that you actually have imbalance in the size of the territories on purpose in order to cater for that. But ultimately, what you're trying to ensure is you at least don't have someone who's not going to be busy their entire time. Yep. The second element then is how do you balance how they go after that territory, and I guess that's something that we can come on to as to how we're encouraging sales reps, having done this work of what the potential is. How do you plan to go and get it? Yeah,
I want to stay on this concept of a ghost territory for a moment, if I can. I mean, that's a real innovation and something that I haven't heard a lot of, and the strategic implication there is pretty substantial, to your point. If you do get additional headcount, if business is going well, and you want to hire some people and place them into territories, by establishing these ghost territories, it makes the implementation of that just so much easier. So that's a real innovation that I wanted to make sure that we emphasized here. When it comes to signing quota, does the person who has his territory or his or her territory plus the ghost territory carry a number for the ghost territory? Or, I mean, how does that work?
No. So we plan only on the territory that's assigned to them. And this effectively gives me some additional capacity.
Okay.
So I guess the way I would look at the quota assignment is the quota has to be the territory that they will keep all year. Yep. So again, if you assign quota to the ghost territory and then you decide to take it off them, you're in this process of, well, hang on a second, I've been carrying quota for that and I've been working on that and so on. So you get into this the problem that we had in the first place. So it has to be additional capacity. Now, the way you can account for it is by either increasing or reducing your overassign to down the management chains in order to ensure that we don't put in place a model that costs way too much. Yep. Because obviously, as people go into kickers when they overachieve, that's when you start paying an awful lot of money. Yep. So doing all of this whilst ensuring that you maintain a mean distribution of cost on achievement is complex. The difficult part here, really, Greg, is there will be accounts where, certainly in enterprise software, you're going to get ELA-type transactions, and these really skew. They both skew the way that you set quotas, but they also skew the way that you have to pay at the back end. But I think that's just something that you have to accept.
Yeah, you just have to live with that, yeah. So as it relates to setting the quotas at the territory level, I understand the bottoms-up approach, which in your case includes a workload analysis in terms of time that a salesperson has to spend in order to pursue an opportunity. I mean, your approach to this is really sophisticated and well thought out, which is great. And that's the reason why I wanted you on the call today, so you could explain this to everybody. I can see, or hear, I should say, some people in my audience with all kinds of tactical questions around how things can go wrong. So, for example, the account, you're assigning a number to account based on an assumed opportunity base. Well, who determines that?
So This is where, I mean, when you give a rep or a manager a quota, the first thing they're going to do is tell you that it's too high.
Yeah, exactly.
And you only know when you've got it wrong when they accept it without questioning that. So it's really how accurate it can be where it's a stretch goal without being a walk in the park. And again, where we've made a mistake before is we've tried to set quotas to be the same. So a territory manager would carry a $2 million quota, a major account manager a $3 million quota. That invariably means that some people are carrying one that's too high and some that are carrying the one that's too low. What we found is as long as the method is consistent by which quotas are set, and you can absolutely explain how you got to that quota based on the inputs of data which came up with the quota in the first place. So this is all things like total addressable market, propensity to spend, how much they've been spending on a quarterly basis over the last 3 years, how much visibility we've got on business that is going to sell going out. So even an example of if you've got an account which bought some software this quarter, we know based on history over the last 10 years that it's likely that account will spend about 3 times that again within the next 2 years. So those are the sorts of metrics where you can sit down with a rep and say, here's your territory that you're working with, why you've removed accounts. If accounts are valid, then generally they don't ask questions about why they've got more accounts. And how you've come up with the opportunity in each one, how that then relates to the typical conversion rate in their patch, and how you've come up with the quota. We have tried a couple of things in areas where there's been some unknown, is to give sales reps the choice of 2 quotas. A quota, and what changes is the percentage they get paid on overachieve. So in those breaking points where it's a little more difficult, perhaps it's a new geography that you're going into, we will have that conversation, which is, okay, well, if you stay on this quota, your kicker is 1.5x over 100%. But if you stay on this quota, which is the stretch quota, then we'll pay you 5x over a sign.
Got it.
When you overachieve, rather. But there tend to be outliers. The key here is be consistent. As soon as there's a feeling that there's been certain people who have been treated special, then you've got a problem. And that typically happens with reps who've got long tenure. They're well-liked. They've got a great relationship with their boss. And these things are overlooked. And that also happens if they've got a larger territory. Say they've been running 10 accounts in financial services for a long time. You know that with 5 accounts, they can actually do more than that because they can go and do some real value selling. But they're left to have the pick of the bunch out of those accounts. That sort of method of balancing territories isn't going to work for very long, and you're just going to give yourself an attrition headache. And we've seen that before. So really enforce whatever the rules you come up with as to how you create that measurement of quota. Consistently apply them, otherwise you've got a problem. Yeah.
All right, fascinating insight. I mean, we've heard 3 things today that I wasn't anticipating, which are fantastic. So opportunity-based quota setting, ghost territories, and how about this one? Approach a salesperson with 2 quotas with 2 economic packages and say, which one do you want? I mean, this is a phenomenal conversation. We need to take another break and pay some bills here. So when we return, Charles and I will discuss his approach to territory planning, transitioning accounts from one territory to another, and communicating territory decisions to the team, which we just got into a little bit, but I want to explore that further. So stick around after the break. You are watching SBI TV. This is a monthly web TV show featuring guests just like you, executives trying to grow their revenues. Each month, you can peek behind the scenes and watch your peers discuss their strategies for how they make their numbers. You are not going to want to miss this. Okay, welcome welcome back. My name is Greg Alexander, and I am the CEO of SBI, and my guest today is Charles Race, the EVP of Field Operations at Informatica. Today we are discussing how to determine headcount and quota capacity through proper territory allocation. We are using SBI's methodology to have this conversation, specifically pages 174 and 175, which you can get at salesbenchmarkindex.com/2016 report. Before the break, Charles and I spoke about potential analysis at the territory level and quota assignment. During this segment, we're going to get from Charles his territory planning process, his thoughts on the tricky process of moving accounts from one territory to another, and lastly, how he communicates territory changes to his team. So Charles, territory planning refers to, very simply, the approach a salesperson takes to his territory. So, for example, where he or she will spend his time, where products will be sold to which accounts, and so on. Do you guys have a formal territory planning methodology, or do you leave it up to the sales reps to do what they've done before?
Certainly not the latter. We use an account planning methodology called Informatica, which is based on Informatica. It's I think that's now part of. I can't remember who bought them, but it's a fairly standard sales methodology around account planning, account and opportunity planning, and we've tailored that somewhat to reflect the different roles. Because obviously, in-depth account planning, when you've got 2 or 3 accounts, is an awful lot easier than if you've got 100 or even 40. So there is a basis of a methodology, but it's really looking at, first of all, understanding that account as to where they have technology, what are the projects that they're working on, really reading their annual report, understanding what their goals are, and sitting with the extended team to plan the approach to the account. And this is the key, and it's the thing that happens or doesn't happen way too often. And I'm going to touch on a couple of things here. First of all, the approach to the account is a team sport. As I mentioned before, we've got pretty complex software which requires a number of people involved in the sales cycle to be successful, whether that's our partners, whether it's our professional services team. Certainly it's how we market, and also it's how we support the specialist requirements of those opportunities, whether they're domain expertise in the vertical segment or whether they're product expertise in the horizontal. So we start an account planning process, which then leads to what we call internally a balanced pipeline methodology. And the whole purpose of balanced pipeline is to ensure that we have the right amount of pipeline being generated, the right amount of coverage by quarter, so that both every territory, i.e. every rep, and every quarter is going to be successful. So ultimately, as you're planning, you're doing 2 things. One, how do I get at that potential which we've previously identified? What are the key areas within the company's business plan that we can align to, and who are the partners that we can assist us in that go-to-market? Yep. And then secondly, what's the order of doing things? Because you can't do everything at once, much as you would like to. And we talk about a sourcing of opportunity. I'm the biggest fan of removing that word from the dictionary, because sourcing an opportunity is again, it's part of a collective of assets, whether they are inside sales doing a call out, whether it's an event with a partner, whether it's a one-on-one meeting with the CIO. These are a collective of action items that the team have agreed to do to maximize their chance of getting at that opportunity. But the order in which we do things is to ensure that we've got a consistent, healthy business quarter on quarter for every single rep. And the reason that you need to do that is, at a regional level, when you roll those together, those planning sessions together that each of the reps are having, you then know how much of the resources you're going to require from the other groups. Because if we do something, for example, which uses every team wants to use the same set of professional services expertise in the first quarter, we wouldn't be able to service that. And equally, we can't subcontract it, or there's other implications. So be very careful when you're doing your planning not to just think going after the biggest and easiest opportunity is the right one, because if you can't service it, you're going to have customer sat issues, and that'll hurt you 10 times more than waiting a quarter to do something else. So we do this process, certainly on the large accounts of larger account planning, which leads into opportunity planning and so on.
Okay, fantastic.
The second thing we then do is where if you've got further down in a territory, and this is where you look at repeatability of an approach. So if I've got 50 accounts and let's say 30 of them are in the retail sector, then I would specifically be looking at what's the repeatable piece of business to acquire revenue in more than one account. So this is more about how are you looking at scaled operations, and your whole marketing approach will change then as well, as will the way that you utilize direct response and inside sales and other functions. It also changes the way that you would maybe use trade shows versus account-based marketing. You might do CIO tables for that collective and do some specific topics rather than perhaps doing mail out on something else. So you then look at repeatability, and that's, again, where we would use partners who have got expertise in those areas to assist us. So it does vary by segment and role, but ultimately there's not a free-for-all on how people approach their territory. But the most important thing, I guess, that I would give as the advice to people is we have QBRs, quarterly business reviews. I think it's a fairly standard thing. These are probably the most abused meetings that anybody has. They probably lack the most structure and focus that they should do, because this is the opportunity where the beginning of the year plan has to become a living and breathing set of documents that are referred to and are tweaked and refocused. So in the QBR sessions that we have each quarter, the reps at the center of the QBR and all of the people who support him, whether it's pre-sales or marketing or whatever it is, are in that QBR talking about how the plan is going for his territory and how we can ensure that whatever the work we're doing is on track or is being course corrected, so that we don't come to the end of the year and say, well, that's a shame. He or she only got to 70%, and now we've got a performance issue. So we don't do annual performance reviews anymore. They're part of the quarterly business review.
Yep. All right, let me shift our attention here to two final pieces within this segment, and then we'll take another break and go into our final segment. So when you have to move one account from one territory to another, or communicate any type of territory change to the field, how do you do that?
I would think the person who absolutely had a formula for solving this would be a rich person right now. But same person who solves linearity issues. We've tried a lot of different ways. Here's the way that's worked the best for us is first of all, doing complex account holds doesn't work. Where somebody gets 75% of this, and then they move after month 2, that's 50-50, and then it's 25-75 the other way. Having two account reps running the same account for an extended period of time is massive disruption. It defocuses both of them. It can cause bad behavior unless you double pay on everything, which is expensive, and it confuses the customer. So we very much like to have a clean cutover. And in order to do that, you can't just spring this on people, otherwise the customer does get very confused. So let's go rewind the conversation to the point of we need to have our planning start very early. And part of that is if there are going to be account shifts, which will happen if you're creating new territories for growth, or if you're balancing territories based on the opportunity that we've seen, you need to have that conversation with the reps. We try to get it out by the beginning of November. So that by beginning of January, when they go into sales kickoff and they start doing their annual planning and they cleared their hangover from Christmas, at that point in time, their head's on their new set of accounts and not on my new set of accounts, plus I still need to close that opportunity. And I've got to do it quickly because otherwise I'm going to lose some commission and so on. Yep. So we do it early. We don't, and except in extreme cases, do any sort of hold or dual comp on the accounts. And again, provided the reps got the accounts has a quota which is carrying those accounts. As long as you don't take something off them and at mid-year, which is, if you did do that, you would then have to readjust quotas. But provided you do it at the end of a year, the rep can't complain that their quota doesn't reflect the territory and the opportunity they've got today.
Right. Okay, fantastic. So a clean break.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay. All right, we're going to take one more break. When we come back, Charles and I will discuss an action plan to put all this great advice to work. The takeaway value is what we call it, and it's right after the break. So hang in there for just a few more minutes.
Making your number is hard. Your problems are complex. Complex problems need complex solutions. Introducing the SBI Magazine. Read in-depth stories written by award-winning journalists about how your peers have overcome their problems to make the numbers. When you need more than a tweet, social post, or blog article, turn to the SBI Magazine. Go to salesbenchmarkindex.com to subscribe.
Welcome back, everybody. So, Charles, let's net this out. If you got hired by a large enterprise business tomorrow, and one of the first things you had to do was build a capacity plan for the sales team, what would you do first, second, and third?
Okay, the first thing I do would be to understand how we are organized today and understand how planning has happened in the past. Going from a tops-down to a bottoms-up approach, going to this level of detail, is a big culture shock. So if there's already an element of in-depth planning at account level and some sort of roll-up, then you can probably skip step 2. But the first thing would be to understand clearly what you're dealing with and how much change you're about to inflict on the team. So I take my example. When we first started moving from postcode-based regions and territory managers to specific segmentation was a huge, huge shift. And it took us 2 years to do it in a gradual approach. So, assuming you've got that understanding, as I'm now in my new organization, the second thing I would then do is understand, both from the product marketing and product management teams, the real total addressable market, and the total addressable market by account and product line and rep and territory. It may well be, and again, this is something I would be looking at if I went into a new role, that you have to start making some hard decisions, which history and the benefit of being brand new somewhere would allow you, which would be, is this region a region I want to have my direct sales team go after, or do I want to make this more of a channel model? And in doing so, can I free up resources to create additional territories elsewhere? So I would look at how you're segmenting the use of resources. The third element then is to get some good data and ensure that you absolutely understand what the bookings position has been by product. Do you understand by accounts how much they're spending on these sorts of technologies? And a lot of that information is available. But get your data into a shape where you can start to do the planning process properly. Without clean data, understanding which accounts should be in an acquire mode versus a retain or a develop mode, it makes it very, very hard for you to be able to understand how to create an opportunity-based quota. So I guess at item 1 was really understand your business and how much change you're prepared to and could inflict on it. The second is understand what the opportunity is by account, by region, so that you can understand where to put the resources and the focus. And the third area then is communicate. Start communicating 6, 7, 8 months early that that the model for the following year is going to change, that you're going to look at more focus and segmentation, that you're going to be taking on some industry best practices as far as account planning and territory mapping goes, because inflicting change quickly, it will harm you an awful lot more than inflicting it or having people prepared over a period of time. Yep. And the final thing is, do not be afraid to push back on the top-down quotas based on the bottoms-up analysis. Yeah. One of the mistakes that is easy to make is the board and the exec teams, they have a figure and a growth number in mind. If it's not possible without some considerable, something very different happening, then use the data that you've derived from the bottoms-up approach to highlight what needs to be done. It's too easy without that information to just take on a number that in your heart you know is not achievable. And it sounds like I'm telling people to grow a pair, and it's not that really. It's by doing this work, you will really see how much risk that you're putting yourself and the business at. Yeah. And then the final element is based on that risk profile, based on the work that you've done and the amount of change you're putting in, ensure you've got your over-assign set correctly. So over-assign would be the difference between the company number and the number that's rolled out in quotas to all of the reps. And we could probably have a whole segment just talking about over-assign.
Yeah, we could.
Some will say that you need to counter for things like attrition, which is true, and for you getting your plan wrong because you didn't do it properly in the first place, and you might have a 30-35% over-assign. Others would say if you get this absolutely right and your business becomes predictable, then the lower the quotas, i.e. reduce the over-assign, the less chance of attrition you have in the first place, more people will be successful. If you get that wrong, however, and have too low quotas, then you're at big danger of either missing or paying way too much in overachievement, which breaks your EBITDA model. So lots to think about.
Yeah,
I don't think there's three simple things, Greg.
Well, I was trying to pay attention to the time here, and unfortunately, we are out of time. But your advice there was fantastic. Let me kind of summarize here for the audience if I can. So capacity planning in large businesses is hard to pull off. If you're attempting to do this, the key to this is a well-thought-out methodology like the one that Charles explained today. If you don't have a method and you wing it, you're going to have a disaster on your hands. So slow down, spend the time thinking through everything, and rely on a proven methodology to guide you through it. You heard one today, and that might be a good starting place for you. A couple tactical things that you can do if you want to get going on this. So if you want to make sure you get it right, get a copy of our methodology, which you can find at salesbenchmarkindex.com/2016 report. It's not the only one, but if you don't have one, sometimes something is better than nothing. If you want one of our experts to come out and see you and kind of walk you through how to apply our method to your business, go to salesbenchmarkindex.com/2016 workshop and request a workshop, and we'll be happy to come out and see you. Charles, you are very innovative here in this, and I'm not sure if you know this because you've been with your one company here, it looks like, for a decade. You're way ahead of the rest of the industry, enterprise software and all other industries, and the way that you do this. And your insights today were really innovative, and I think the people that listen, watch, and read this are going to benefit greatly. So I want to really give you a hearty thank you for coming on the show.
You're very welcome, Greg, and hope it's helpful to many in the difficult position that I found myself in a couple of years ago. So yeah. Good luck.
All right, I also want to thank you, our audience, for tuning in. This show has become really popular, which allows us to secure guests like Charles, and that happens because you're tuning in each week. So thanks a bunch for tuning in, and here is to me wishing you much success as you try to make your number.
This has been the SBI Podcast. For more information on SBI services, case studies, the SBI team and how we work, or to subscribe to our other offerings, please visit us at salesbenchmarkindex.com.